cyber threats are an emerging risk to the global economy. So let's go ahead and take a look at this with this warning, that is to say, with Scott Schober, CEO of Berkeley Veritronics Systems. Scott, pleasure to have you back on the show. I want to start with the point from the World Economic Forum. They're pointing out to the fact that the pandemic forced people to work from home, making remote logins and things of the like more common. How is this adding to cyber threats?
Well, it's kind of a difficult issue because it's so many different things that cyber criminals can now do. They can target people at home much better than they can at the office. If you think about it, at the job, you've got an IT staff. They've got things in place to keep you safe. Once you're at home, and a lot of people went back home in this next wave with the pandemic, suddenly remote access is a huge problem. Phishing scams, huge problem. Ransomware attacks, they're on the uprise, as you mentioned there. It's getting worse and worse. Plus, unsecure network connections. At home, you're using your home Wi-Fi router. You probably don't have it configured securely with WPA2, WPA3 encryption set. You don't have a strong password as you do, and it's not managed as well at the office. Employees, they can't spot scams. Why? Because at home, you're distracted. The guy's delivering an Amazon package, the dog's barking in the background. They're not as focused and concentrated on keeping things safe. Still, weak passwords, not using two-factor authentication. They're using their own personal devices. So there is a ton of reasons why working remotely just opens everybody up to more vulnerabilities that can be exploited.
And we know what the obvious economic consequences for something like what happened with the Colonial Pipeline, obviously, or even what happened with Kaseya. But what else is there to this threat to the economy that they're looking at?
Well, just think about ransomware attacks alone, which is one of the biggest sectors that's growing. 60% of small businesses, when they're victimized by a ransomware attack, within 6 months, they close. That means all those employees are out of jobs. The company goes under. It's that big of a devastating effect. If you look back just a couple of years ago, the average ransomware payout was about $5,000. You look last year, the average payout was well over $200,000. So cyber criminals are making a lot of money, and they're putting a lot of people out of business.
Now, there's always that talking point that we hear that the cyber criminals, they're more sophisticated, leaving those who are actually trying to protect against them way behind. Why aren't we able to keep up with all of this? I mean, it feels like in the movies, and I hate to always use that analogy, but you have the hackers that they hired to do security for the IT company, so that way we would never see these things. That doesn't seem to be the case.
Now, well, think about it this way. For a cyber criminal, they got to get it right one time. That's really all they got to do, get it right once. Whereas the good guys, us, we got to get it right every time, from preventing them from getting in. That is really difficult. The other thing cyber criminals do, they're very adept at, is they share information. So when they've got a trick, when they've got the next strain of malware, they're going to share that with another cyber criminal. The communication, they're using automated tools to help, and all that's available down in the dark web, most of it for free. Whereas private and public sector, we're not sharing information really well. It's protected, it's quiet, the government's not sharing enough with what's going on in the industry, and that lack of communication is making it really difficult for the good guys to fight off the cyber criminals. So I predict it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better.
I mean, that's such a concerning warning, but I feel like I agree with you at this point. Now, I want to hit on one last point. I only have about 30 seconds for your answer here, but cryptocurrency is obviously always thrown in there because that's how they're getting paid now. But they used to get paid in bags of cash. That's how the criminals did it as well. So is cryptocurrency really making cybercrime worse?
Oh, yeah, it unfortunately is. And think about, just in a general sense, what is cryptocurrency? It's allowing them to have no intermediaries. There's no bank, there's no middlemen, nobody that could track it. It gives a degree of anonymity, which is ideal for cyber criminals. You can't chase them down and catch them, which allows them to really thrive. It's difficult to survive with cryptocurrency really taking on by such a storm, especially with ransomware.
Well, I totally get that point, but I think there obviously has to be some middle ground, because it seems like cryptocurrency is definitely here to stay. If you watch this show, we cover it pretty much every day. Scott Schober, CEO of Berkeley Veritronics Systems. Always appreciate having you on the program.
Thanks for having me back.